Smith, Council Chambers, City Hall. We are going to go ahead and start with our first discussion item, actually. So number 1, school response, Police Officer John Stern.
I told him to be here at 5 because I thought it'd be a little later. So
Okay. Scratch that.
Just so he gets done.
Yeah, and if he has another
Okay.
thing he has to do.
So I guess when he comes in, we'll finish whatever we're doing and
Yeah, okay.
move along.
I apologize.
Okay, so we have the regular proposed agenda. We have mayor's awards, a couple proclamations.
Do you want to go back to them?
Okay.
There he is.
Just kidding. Back to discussion item number 1.
I started?
Yes.
Awesome.
I figured if you got somewhere else to go, you might as well.
Good afternoon. I'm John Stern. I'm with the Burlington Police Department. I'm currently assigned as the school resource officer at the high school. I've been in that capacity for the past 2 years, and prior to that, I was the middle school resource officer for 2 years. It's my understanding you guys want to kind of hear what we're doing to protect our students. Well, prior to each start of the school year, the staff is trained in the ALICE procedures. And what ALICE stands for is alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. This training consists of a review of the ALICE protocols and then several practice scenarios involving locking down, barricading, evacuating, and countering the attacker. After each scenario is done, we do a debrief with the staff. We do a crisis plan, and it's reviewed annually and then updated also. And basically what this crisis plan covers is everything from an active shooter to a medical emergency. And what we've done is each staff member, we've put a flip chart together for them that has all of this information in there that they can keep in their rooms next to their rosters. And in case of an emergency, they can go right to that flip chart and just go down point to point to point to point as to what they need to do. We review the building security annually. The object obviously is to harden the target. One of the things that we did here in the last school year is we updated the camera systems. We got 3 new servers for the camera systems, and it's improved the camera quality, picture quality immensely. We talked about the emergency procedures guide. They're also given placards for each room. They're encouraged again to keep this stuff in an area so in case something was to happen, it's right there for them. We encourage the staff and supply them with safety buckets. Basically, it's a 5-gallon bucket that has some toiletry items, some first aid items, water, snacks, in case they had to be locked in there for an extended period of time. During the school year, schools are always in a status of what's called soft lockdown. And basically what that means is that all the exterior doors and windows are secured. All the interior classroom doors are locked. This is a great starting point for them. It's a good place to start. If a guest comes in, they are directed to the office where they are identified. They have to sign in, and then they're also given a visitor's pass. We've initiated the incident command structure at Burlington High School. We have a dedicated spot as our incident command in the high school. One thing that I always, and the staff always encourages is to the students, if they see something, say something. As a district, each school tries to do lockdown drills. Ideally, I would love to see a lockdown drill every quarter. Most generally, it's between 1 and 4 lockdowns during a school year that we do. Since the students brought this to our attention and had some concerns, I've met with several of the students and talked to them about their concerns. We've reviewed the procedures that we have in place. Mr. Kane, the principal at the high school, wanted me to come up with some training videos. I was able to ascertain a couple training videos showing middle schools and high schools going into lockdown using the ALICE procedures. Those have been sent out to all the students to watch at their leisure. And again, we've continued to discuss how to better harden our target. So we're always looking to improve things, and I believe that's the best way to do things. Questions?
I guess maybe for me, I just curious to know what some of the students' concerns were. You can,
Some of their concerns were that we don't do enough training. And anytime we can do more training, I'm all for that. That's going to make us that much better. I often talk about, if an incident happens, you're going to fall back on your gross motor skills. Those finite skills. I've often compared it to like shooting a basketball, shooting a free throw. All right, the first time that you went and shot a free throw, pretty sure you did. First 10, you probably didn't make it. I can't make 10 now, so it's no big deal. But you practice it. You shoot 10, 15, 20, 30 a day, and by the end of the month, you're hitting 7 or 8 out of 10. You're falling back on those gross motor skills that you're going to ingrain in you. That's what I like to do with the training. I like to go over these things so that they will fall back on, we need to barricade, we need to prepare ourselves, we need to do this, this, and this.
Is ALICE a national program that we subscribe to, or is it something, just an outline that's kind of been drawn up and tried and proven, and we just have adopted it?
ALICE was created by a teacher and I believe an officer down in Texas, if I remember correctly. It's a national program. They provide training to officers, school administrators, staff members. I'm an instructor in that. I've been through that training. We then come back and teach our local schools, businesses, etc., the concepts that we have.
Okay, and you mentioned the hardening of a target, and I think one of the reasons you may be here tonight is because the question was posed to me through an email from my concerned citizen of do we have anything in place, and I didn't know how to respond to that. And I know that we've probably got SOPs or standard operating procedures in place that maybe you don't want to discuss, which is perfectly fine just because of the fact that we don't want to put that out there for everybody. But the biggest concern was making sure that we had taken the steps ahead of time to make sure that in the event something were to happen, like an active school shooter, that we're prepared and that we've discussed this and thought about it beforehand, then, having an event like that take place and then not having anything prepared for it.
Sure. Yes, we prepare regularly for this. Even after we do a drill, whether it be a fire drill, a tornado drill, a lockdown drill, we do a debrief and we see if we need to make any changes, modifications, do we need to correct something. Like I said, every year we go over this plan and make adjustments, whether it be adjusting different staff members to different responsibilities, all the way up to, like I said, this year I was able to get the new servers for the cameras to help us with our hardening of our target.
Okay.
Any other questions? Does that kind of answer? I mean, is that what you guys were looking for? Cool.
Yeah, I think, like I said, we just wanted to make sure, or the community just wants to make sure that those things have already been thought about, discussed, and planned for in the event that something like that were to happen. So I think
Sure.
you've shown that tonight.
Outstanding.
great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so going back, we have mayor's awards and then a couple proclamations. 10-year award and Citizens Academy graduation. Let's see. Number 6 is a public hearing, consideration of sale of a portion of North 7th Street right-of-way located west of the property locally known as 625 Valley Street, City of Burlington, Iowa, with conditions.
The property at 625 Valley, I think recently went up for auction. During that process, they found that what appears to be a portion of the building still remained in city right-of-way. Looking through our files, it was vacated in, I believe, 1957. Went through the city council and was vacated. There's no record that it was actually transferred at that time. Generally, whenever we vacate right-of-way now, we have a sale as part of that ordinance, but there was no record at that time that it had ever been sold. So they've requested to purchase that portion of right-of-way that was vacated over 60, 70 years ago. So this is just selling that portion of right-of-way to the property adjacent to them. Did have interest from the property to the west about possibly vacating the remaining portion of right-of-way. There is a sewer that runs down this half of the right-of-way, so we would not be vacating any more of that. We want to retain that for that sewer. So selling approximately 40 feet of right-of-way and retaining the other half of the right-of-way for that sewer. But R&R Development, Inc. Did put in the bid to purchase this property.
Okay.
Any questions?
None on that.
All right. The next is consideration of an ordinance vacating and selling a portion of South 14th Street right-of-way located adjacent to the property at 1408 Harrison Avenue.
This property, the portions of property to the north of this were vacated and sold a couple years ago. This went through that process at that time. It was recommended to vacate the entire portion and sell it, but the property of 1408, I think, was under contract sale at the time, and the property owner, not the contract purchaser, did not have interest at that time. I think the contract has been fulfilled, and the owner now desires to purchase that portion of right-of-way. So this would be vacating and selling that portion of right-of-way just to the west of this. This is a unusual area where the somewhat alley and the street were in the same right-of-way. Had a lot of discussion at the time, but the 4 properties to the north, as you can see, have already acquired and combined their lots with that right-of-way. So this did run all the way north over that portion. So this is the final lot that would kind of complete that. There is an easement that is maintained over that for utilities and access. The property owners all know that. So again, this is just kind of completing that process that was started a couple years ago by vacating and then selling that portion of right-of-way to that neighbor.
Very good. Any questions?
None? Nope.
All right. Next, we have a resolution approving bond purchase agreement for general obligation corporate purpose bonds, Series 2018A.
Okay, since she's not going to talk, we've gone through several steps for authorizing going out for the issuance of bonds, gone through the rating process so that we can do it. The projects that are being funded with this are repairs to Central Avenue Bridge, Mount Pleasant Street Bridge, that's the larger one. The Central Avenue is $350,000, 4.35 for Mount Pleasant Street, about $1.9 million for a flood wall, and 1.55 for, I think that's about it for principal on general street projects. We do a resurfacing, that's our hot mix HMA project, the 1.4 million, and then general miscellaneous in the 150,000 range. Total bonded amount, inclusive of costs for bond issuance, is anticipated in $8,350,000 range. The resolution you have here is for not to exceed $8,500,000, which is what we went out and advertised for. And I don't know, is Travis here next week? That's something I haven't even talked with him about, but we're looking at a sale for this next week and see where our numbers come in, and hopefully they're fairly close to what our preliminary numbers were. That, I mean, the interest rate changes that have occurred have been in line with what was anticipated as we went through the budget process.
Okay. Any questions right now?
I don't have any.
No.
All right. Next, we have a resolution approving the final plat of Beams subdivision.
This is a one-lot subdivision. This is in the 2-mile area of Des Moines County, just directly across from city right-of-way on city property, or city corporate limits off Mill Dam Road, subdividing off one lot from a larger lot. I think it's zoned commercial. They're looking to develop a commercial property in this location. Aerial shows a little bit more where it's at. Down past Case, coming up Mill Dam Road with the golf course to the east, Des Moines County Highway 99 and Tamer Road there are there to the east, and the golf course to the west. But just subdividing this lot off of this larger tract here. Again, any property within the 2-mile growth area of the city requires subdivision review and approval by the city as well as the county.
What's going in there?
He's talked about a shooting range at that location.
I'm assuming it's an indoor shooting range?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Any other questions?
Have we touched base with or do we even have the authority to discuss this with the residents that's right next to that? I mean, last time I checked, shooting ranges are probably pretty loud.
The Beams family owns the property to the north and south of this, so
Okay.
the only ones affected would be the golf course and a large area there. But the construction portion of it is controlled by the county land use administrator. The only authority we have is subdivision.
There's the review. Okay.
Yep.
All right, sounds good. Next, we have a resolution approving the final plat of RBI Limited subdivision. I don't know.
Same thing here. This again is in the 2-mile area, splitting off one lot from a larger area. This is north off of Tamer Road. One lot, approximately 2 acres in size. Just on the back side of the levee there. Splitting off the portion in yellow and retaining the remaining portion with the lot there. Again, a 1-lot subdivision within our 2-mile review area. They do have a access easement at this kind of juncture there for the property to the north and then to allow property to the south.
Any questions? All right, next we have a resolution amending storm water utility system fees pursuant to Chapter 100.02 of the Burlington City Code.
Okay, the next 4 resolutions kind of all go together. These are the fees that we approved when we approved the budget, that's the amounts that we've have budgeted for. So the first one is the stormwater, and it had a 3% increase on the fees compared to last year. The next, if you have any questions about any of them, just let me know. The next one is the sewer user fees. That too, everything was increased by 3%. These will all be given to the waterworks, and then they will get them effective July 1st of 2018 for those bills. Solid waste fees, that resolution is increasing the monthly fee to $14.25 from $14, which we talked about during the budget too. And then the last one is the septic hauler user fees too. All of them have been increased by 3%, so.
And these are the fees that are reflective of the sewer separation order, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We did annual 9% rate increases for quite some time. Last one of those was 2012, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And since then, we've been a 3% annual rate increases. DNR's been willing to work with us at that kind of,
Maintaining a
Level.
3% annually, okay.
although where that goes as we present a facility plan remains to be seen with the work, the scale of work that is involved in that, and how long that would extend the project life cycle if we were to try to do that with 3% rate increases.
All right. Any other questions? No? Okay. So that puts us down into the proposed consent agenda. First one is resolution amending swimming lesson fees for Dankworth Park Pool.
The city approved an agreement for operation of the pool with the dome, and once that's constructed, and as part of that, for operation of swimming lessons under that same agreement. The agreement states that fees for swimming lessons shall be reasonably comparable to other local lesson fees and shall be approved by the city council. So the swimming lessons moving forward would be operated by a separate agreement. They're proposing 3 separate fee structures, $38 for group lessons, which includes 8, 40-minute lessons up to a 12-to-1 student-to-instructor ratio, $60 for semi-private lessons, includes 4 30-minute lessons with a typical 3-to-1 student-to-instructor ratio, and $115 for advanced group lessons. That includes 8 45-minute lessons with a typical 6-to-1 student-to-instructor ratio, with an early bird discount on the group or private lessons there through April 30th. Again, these were proposed by the group operating this the pool. They are here if you have any questions or comments on it too.
Any questions or?
No.
Nope. All right, looks good. I got nothing. The next we have a resolution. We have some set date for public hearings, April 16th. We have consideration of plans and specifications for the 2018 Sealcoat Street Program. Consideration of plans and specifications for the 2018 HMA Overlay Project. Consideration of an application for a housing sustainability grant from the Iowa Economic Development Authority, Community Development Block Grant Program. Consideration of an ordinance amending Chapter 163 Environmental Nuisances of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Burlington, Iowa. And consideration of an ordinance repealing Chapter 100 Stormwater Utility and replacing with a new Chapter 100 Stormwater Utility.
Could I interject on this
Yes.
part? Even though we have we already had the 3 resolutions, stormwater utility fees, sewer fees, and then
Septic.
septic hauler fees that all go into our sewer account. Those are all with the overall goal of doing the 3% annual increases. In that, the one specifically towards the stormwater fees is increasing as of July 1. This ordinance below that we're setting a public hearing on is for if we can get it done and it goes through the process, is for implementation for July 1 as well. It would replace the section. We need to at least have specifically from a timing perspective for Waterworks to be able to get their billings done on the residential side. The residential rates are going to be, the base residential rates are going to be staying the same under both the current system and what we're looking to transition to. We need to have authorization for them to be sending bills out based off of our current ordinance structure and the rates that are based off of it. At the same time, we're going to be coming through the process over the course of the next few meetings after our presentation tonight as a basis of that, talking about completely changing how we do our stormwater fees. At the same time, the base rate's going to be the same amount for residential. We're going to change the structure primarily on the commercial, break that up into what I would say would be more categories instead of the 3 basic categories that are listed in here for square footage. And it will change how we allocate the funds when they come in. Instead, after that process, instead of having the two sets of funds, the sewer and the stormwater all coming into one pot, we're gonna need to go into a system where we're breaking those up into two separate funds and really treating that as a separate fund. There's a lot there. They all interplay, but they do relate well with each other. The rates that we're going in place give us a basis to move forward under our existing set. The resolution does, but we'll do an ordinance that will replace it. Overall, well, you'll get to go into the structure here as we get into the work session later to talk about what the changes are going to be from the one to the other. But just want you to know that we are doing stuff that they're contradictory, but we have to go through with where we're at currently and then what we're transitioning to.
Okay.
All right. Sounds good. Now we're on to our discussion items. I guess we will start with the police annual report.
Thank you, sir.
Last one.
Yeah.
You have some extra copies for,
Yeah, we've got
The
plenty of
okay.
copies of that. Oh, you want me to leave one behind?
no, I can,
I can get them to Kathy.
yeah, that works. I just
Okay.
wanted to make sure.
Yep.
No.
Ready? Well, good evening. I'm going to present you with the Burlington Police Department 2017 Annual Report. So I want to start off by, we actually try to put quite a bit of time into our cover page and the photos that are on that cover page because they're really significant as to what we accomplished in 2017. And the top photo is Daniel Ramiro. He's a probationary officer with the Burlington Police Department. As you know, we have spent a lot of time and dedicated a lot of time to recruiting minorities to the department. We feel like this was another major accomplishment for us. I mean, till age of 13, he lived in the Philippines, came over to America, spent time with his family in California, went back and forth a few times, but ultimately settled in Peoria, where he went on to Macomb to get a 4-year degree in law enforcement. And he's just a spectacular individual. He's doing great. He's still in the field training program, but he's probably within 3 or 4 weeks to at least getting out on solo patrol on his own. So that's just something we're really proud of. And Daniel's a great guy. The second photo is a reserve officer. That's Reserve Officer Jeff Good. And he participates every year with us at our Shop of the Copy event. So that's what he's doing, shopping there a little bit. And then the bottom picture are the two majors in the organization with a young child that wants to grow up to be a police officer. And that was at our Safe Trick or Treat night at the auditorium. So that's just a little bit of what kind of effort goes in. I guess this is a cover. It's more than just a cover to us. So major accomplishments. We'll talk a little bit about the facility. We're not in the facility yet, but all the design and all the effort and all the work that has gone into the facility, we're getting awful close. We're still looking at that mid-May so we can get down there and get in the building. I think that second week of June, you'll see that there's actually some operations that have been transferred in that building and will be up and running. So that's something else we're really proud of. We've been working hard on our critical incident team. As you know, we talk about mental illness in our communities and the stress that's putting on public resources and especially the police department. Well, how do we deal with that and how do we make a difference? So about a year, actually 2 years ago, and we really hit it hard last year, was training officers in how to deal with mental illness. Yeah, we get 4 hours of required training a year. That doesn't even start to scratch the surface. So what we're trying to do is get to the point, and we're there now, where we have trained the trainers. Guys that are good enough at this now that can start training other officers what they know, and it's starting to work. As a matter of fact, we're starting to have some real success. These officers are willing to come out to scenes where it's over the head, if you will, for lack of a better word, of the officers that's on the scene. We're getting to the point where we're trying to get a portal system opened up to where we can have let's say FaceTime, if you will, or Skype or whatever technology, so we could actually talk to a licensed psychiatrist, psychologist, that we could start to communicate and intervene while we're on the scene. I mean, and that's going to be hugely helpful. And with this, we're working with the BHAT team at the hospital to make sure we have a place to go. I mean, it's always difficult to have a place. Where can we even get somebody evaluated? Because there's times that they're full, they're busy. And so this whole program is a collaborative effort that has seven multiple counties involved to make a difference. And they're starting partnerships, like I said, with the jails, with the hospitals, with law enforcement. So collectively, we can maybe start to make a difference in this, because it's a difficult situation for us to deal with as a, let's say, call for service. The 4th of July celebration. That really turned out to be a huge success. I mean, we thought it would have an impact on the neighborhood, but when it was all said and done, and even yet today I had comments on the importance of that and kind of the good feeling it brought to the neighborhood with police, fire, all the emergency services up there, public officials such as yourselves that were up there, and people felt safe. They felt like they could come out for a day and enjoy the day. So that was a big success, and I would expect that to continue. We did get the dispatch center relocated at the hospital. It's out there now. It's up and running. For the most part, it was a fairly seamless move from the perspective of the user. Now, I think they have gone through a lot trying to make it work, and kudos to them. I think there's still things that they're working on, but really for the user, for us on the other end, it went fairly well. The K-9 unit, talk about that a little bit. It's been just a huge success for us, and we continue just to improve on that program. Like I told you before, we made an adjustment with that. Instead of having it in the POP unit, we put it back on patrol, where to actually spend more time with more patrol officers to get more use out of the dog, and that seems to really be working. It's been a highly successful program, thanks to the community, $70,000 worth, thank you. It's been if not necessarily a written goal, it's been clear to us at the police department we need to work on nuisances, abandoned vehicles, so we strive to do this, and of those 472 abandoned vehicles, we're talking about one part-time employee that primarily works on parking downtown. We all know her, Vicky, great lady. But when she's not down there working, she's out working on these abandoned vehicles. Not to say officers don't work, some they do, but for the very most part, Vicky's helping us with this. So we're diligently trying to clean that up. And you'll see a little bit further here in the annual report, but we have definitely seen a decrease in shots fired calls and an increase in gun seizures, which it's still an ongoing goal of ours, gun violence in the community. There's no question that's still going to be one of our top priorities, but as we go through this, I think I can confidently say we're making some progress. In the reserve unit, what can you say? 789 hours, almost 780 hours they dedicated to the department and the community. I mean, that's impressive, so thanks to all the gals and guys involved in that unit. It's much appreciated. And I've gone through this with you before, so I won't take a lot of time with this, but this just really does kind of lay out how the department is organized. If you're not familiar, and I'm confident that you guys and gals are all familiar with this. The only thing I'd point out is we talked about that. We had a resignation, and that'd be Officer Prickett that was under Squad D with Sergeant Zahn. So that has created an opening in the organization. So it's just an ongoing challenge all the time to keep the place up to staff, if you will. Any questions about that chart? I went through it kind of fast, but we've just gone through it before. So years of service and how many, that's important for a department to keep track of. And you'll note there's 11 officers with 3 years or less experience. So it seems like we're kind of stacked up on the young side of things, and then we're going to have quite a few officers that have over 23, 21 years of experience actually. So it's a little bit better balanced than it was when we started talking about this 4 or 5 years ago. We saw a pretty good gap in the middle, and that can be kind of concerning as you try to promote people and you move forward in the organization and your succession planning. But it seems like we're kind of getting a little bit better balance there now. I mean, you got quite a few officers from that 11 years through 27 years, which is kind of nice to see. Any questions about that? And this is something else that we track is our post-secondary years of education. And for the longest time, the best we could get was to 50%, 2-year versus 4-year. So now we're really starting to see we're starting to make a difference there, and talking to people and the importance of education. And it seems like every year we end up with about 25 to 30 applications. Now those are the people that have passed everything, filled out an application, and we can at least start looking at them. I'm going to say that number in today's world is 60% 4-year plus degrees. So I mean, in law enforcement today, it's changed drastically than what it was even a mere 10 years ago. There's just a lot of people that are seeking out a 4-year degree in our field, so that's a good thing. It's a good sign. Talk about calls for service. These aren't necessarily responses. That'll be on the next slide, but these are calls for service that come into the dispatch center that have to be dealt with. And some of them, as you'll read on there, some of them may be a background check or a driver's license check. But for the most part, these are calls for service that the Burlington Police Department handled, that the Sheriff's Office, and at West Burlington. And we put that in there just for a comparison. I mean, I know we're the big brother, and I know we have more officers, but I think the Sheriff's Office is around 20 sworn. And so we're just a little over double of that, if you will. And so when it comes from calls for service, I mean, that's a lot of calls for service. 36,000 calls in a year is a lot of calls for service. And so we just like to point that out, that it gets pretty busy down there. But this is a little, I don't want to say a better representation, but what this is actual calls that required a police response, that we actually responded to with these calls. And you'll see that they're trending up, and I'll show you here in the other slides why that's happening, which in this case is a positive thing. And a lot of this will center around, we had more officers in 17 than we've had in a long time. And so when you have more officers, you're going to have a lot more self-initiated activities and directed activities that we've been able to do. And I'll kind of show you. So as I look through them and really trying to drill down the numbers, that's where the calls are coming from. Things that we're initiating, that we're having a chance to do a little bit more proactive things than we've ever been able to in the past. And that just comes with the POP unit and the opportunity to start doing some things that we haven't had the chance to. So that's a good thing. That call, those calls for service coming up is a really good thing. And this is a breakdown of all those calls for service. I'm just going to kind of flip through these. If you have any questions about that, let me know. But that's just what that is. It's just simply a breakdown of all those calls. So here's our top 10 calls for service. And I specifically want to talk about the suspicious person activity. That's something we've worked really, really hard on as a department. I know you heard Officer Stern kind of touch on that, say something, or see something, say something. Well, we've really tried to put that out. And if you look, this is only a 2-year comparison, but if we went back 3, 4, 5 years, always before our animal calls were our highest call for service. And we're now, the last 3 years for sure, the suspicious person call is the highest. And that should be. I think if we're getting our message out there and we're doing what we're supposed to do, then those calls should be coming in. And so we encourage that. If you see something that you're not comfortable with, call us. And it doesn't matter. If it's not a violation, we'll figure that out when we get there. But if you're uncomfortable, there's a reason. There's something telling you that something isn't right, and I'd like somebody to look at that. So people in the community are responding, and that's great. That's what we want. So that is just something I wanted to point out. Our property accidents are down as well. And I got another slide that kind of talks about that, so we're proud of that too. And domestic violence is down. So this is going to talk a little bit about citations, traffic citations. And as the chief of police, and you're going to have a new chief, and this might change, but as the chief of police, I, for the last 5.5 years, have really tried to drill home causation. I mean, let's not be out there writing tickets to be writing tickets. I mean, anybody can sit on Kern Street. It's a 25-mile-an-hour zone on the overpass. And that, to me, is not policing. That's not policing. What policing is okay, we're having accidents at this intersection. People are running this stop sign, or they're speeding through this area, and they shouldn't be. Let's work on that. Let's get in our school zones. Let's protect our kids. And if there's a reason or there's cause, let's do that. Let's write a ticket. And I'm good with that. That's what we're there for. And so it's having an effect because our fatalities are pretty much non-existent. Our property damage accidents are going down and our personal injury accidents are going down. So to me, that's really what traffic enforcement is all about. Now, I might be in the minority as that, to say that. I think there's other law enforcement, chiefs, administrators that they like to see those numbers up. Well, I don't look at it from a numbers. I look at it from strictly causation. If we have a problem, let's do something about it. Let's keep our people safe. That's what it's for. So of those citations, this just gives you a breakdown of the most frequent citations. And kind of to me, our highest numbers here are kind of a little bit disturbing. I mean, we look at proof of insurance, look at license suspended or revoked, and non-registered vehicles. I mean, and most of those go hand in hand because a lot of people that are suspended can't register their vehicle and they can't get insurance. So just to point out to the community, this is a problem. And I think as we live in a community and we talk about bridges out of poverty and people that are in situations that struggle to make their rent, they struggle to put food on the table, and then we compound all these other problems in there, it's just something to think about. I think it's a reflection of maybe the status of some people in the community that have difficulties getting by every day, you know, and as a police department, you sure try to recognize that. As a community, we should try to recognize that and be mindful of that. So just kind of as you continue your careers with the council, you know, I'd ask you kind of keep track of that. I mean, there's a reason for that. Those are major league fines, and they all kind of, like I said, they join back together. I can't afford insurance, and I'm suspended, so I can't register my car, but I have to try to get to work. And you see this whole thing, this, you know, and I wish I had an answer for that. I mean, the bottom line, you get in an accident, you cause a problem, you don't have insurance, I mean, you're going to get a ticket, you know. But I don't know, is that really how we solve this problem? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. I think it's important that as a community, we're well aware of this. Yeah.
Is that something that we can adjust from a policy standpoint? I mean, at the end of the day, and I bring up a scenario where there was a local officer that worked for Fish and Game, and he basically said that if you were to catch somebody fishing without a fishing license, the goal wasn't to ticket them for fishing without a fishing license. The goal was for them to go get a license so that they're actively and legally participating in something that he thinks he'd like to see more actively or more people participate in. So is there a policy or something that could be adopted or looked at where if somebody gets pulled over either for lack of insurance or lack of vehicle registration? I understand the suspended part is probably something that leads from a previous charge. But is there something in place where if we were to issue a citation, the citation could be removed if those requirements are met within a specific amount of time?
No. I mean, those kind of things can't be done by policy.
Okay.
That'd have to be something that was agreed upon with the court. And, you know, whether the judge felt like doing that or working with the defendant, whatever the case may be. And like I said, a lot of these situations happen where we have victims that have a valid license and they have insurance, and now we're involved in this motor vehicle accident and somebody doesn't have neither, and that needs dealt with too.
Yeah.
You know, so that is kind of a difficult situation. I just feel like it's important we know the kind of the status of why things are the way they are.
Accidents would have to be excluded from that scenario.
Sure,
because of
sure.
The incident, but
Yeah, and again, I know that's not something we could change with policy.
Okay.
I mean, but it's a good question. That would sure spur a topic of discussion.
okay.
So here's a separate slide for motor vehicle accidents, and this will clearly demonstrate what I was talking about. So the property damage accidents are on a nice downward trend. The personal injury accidents are down, and it's really obviously unfortunate. We had a fatality in 2016. God bless that family. But from 2010 to 2017, that's the one fatality we had in the community, and those are pretty positive numbers from an accident standpoint. Like I said, the one fatality is a really, really bad deal for everybody involved, and we hate that. So this would kind of look at our incidents, and as our calls for service go up and our self-initiated activities go up, your incidents are going to go right up with them. So again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, I look at incidents, we're doing our job. I mean, the more CFSs we have, we for sure should be having more incidents. Those percentages should probably stay pretty much the same. And I think from a UCR standpoint, or how we're compared to other communities standpoint, a lot of places report incidences different than we do. But to me, UCR is very clear on their guidelines on how incidents are to be reported. And I think you're going to see some changes in this. I actually think the federal government is trying to combine what's called IBR, which is incident-based reporting, and UCR, which is unified crime. They're trying to combine those two so we can get more of a streamlined, what I want to say, everybody on the same page reporting. And like they said, the government said, and they're going to be right, if they go to that system, you're going to see that crime in general, as it's reported, is going to seem like an increase. Because there's going to be, I don't want to say agencies forced, but there's going to be a different way reporting is done. As an example, technically, if you had 10 car burglaries in one block and they all happened last night, by UCR standards, you could report that as one burglary. Because it happened basically at the same time, same location, same type of crime. But here's the problem with that. Now you got all these 10 people lumped into one case, when really, to me, they're clearly 10 separate cases. You're a victim, and you're a victim. And you maybe lost something far more important than you lost. So as an agency, we need to separate those cases and work those cases. So it might be the same suspect inevitably, but that's okay. You're still treated with a lot of respect, and you're truly a victim of that crime. So you can kind of see where now all of a sudden Burlington shows 10 burglaries, then another comparable city might show 1. And they're technically not in violation of the UCR rules by doing that. But I do think if they combine these and this keeps moving forward, I think you'll see a more standardized way of reporting. So, and there's a lot of cities report just like we do. I don't want to make it sound like we're the only one, because that's not true at all. A lot of them report every incident as we do. But just so you know, there's other places that don't. So this again is a breakdown of those incidents. And if you have any question about any one of those, feel free to ask me. But there's just way too many of them to stand here and try to go through those.
I do, Chief. It
Yeah.
looks like there's a pretty huge jump in the drug and narcotic violations.
Oh, yeah, yes, there was, and as a matter of fact, I can explain that. And again, this is reporting. And the way it was always reported before is those are strictly our cases. We get a lot of help from, let's say, even out-of-state task forces, state agencies, federal agencies. And I made it a point last year and told the task force, if you're helping, if you're assisting on a case and we're using manpower to do that, we need to be tracking that. And so I said, I want a CFS or an incident on every case you're involved in, whether we initiated the case or whether we didn't. So that's a great question, and at this point forward, it's kind of like our shots fired call when I went back and said, I want evidence. I want to know for sure that there were shots fired. I want casings, I want a bullet, I want multiple witnesses. We need to know that that happened, that it wasn't a car backfiring, a transformer, a firework. And so this is very similar to that. Okay. And I think in the future you'll see in 18, 19, it'll be a lot more balanced. That's why it looks so far out of whack.
Okay.
Is just is a reporting thing. But just above that, the weapon law violation, and you'll kind of see that later on, as we've had as we try to pinpoint gun violence. I mean, we've made, like I said, targeted projects to try to get as many guns off the street as we can. So the next slide will be arrests, and these are criminal arrests. And again, you'll see that number coming up, but if you look at those charts, they're all kind of about the same when you look at CFSs incidents, and then arrests. And they should. I mean, the more incidents we should have more arrests if we're doing our job. So percentage-wise, those are just kind of coming up together. And again, that's proactive patrols that have had time to be assigned to certain areas in an effort to reduce crime. So we're proud of that number. We think that you give us the resources, you gave us some people to try to deal with the problem, and we're dealing with it. So we're really proud of that. And I've only tracked this for 2 years, 16 and 17, because I think it's important that the community understands and that really everybody understands that repeat offenders are a problem. I mean, it's not only a problem for law enforcement, it's a problem for the community, it's a problem for the court system. And do I have the answers to change that? No, but I think it's important when you look through here that you had 5 people, or 24 people that had 5 or more arrests. You had 78 people that with 3 or more, and 262 with 2 or more. So, I mean, we have repeat offenders, and I don't think we're distinctly different than anybody else with that, but I thought it was something that we needed as a department to track.
I'm not misreading this. Somebody was arrested 14 times?
Where are you at? Which line are you at?
All the way at the
All
bottom.
the way to the bottom?
In 2016.
Yeah, in 16, one individual was arrested 14 times. That's correct. No, you're not misreading it.
Well, it kind of goes back to your suspended license though, too.
does.
Because, you know, I constantly see the same names in the paper.
It does. And in this case, the 14, you're talking about homelessness
Okay.
and problems associated with homelessness. Absolutely. You're not being arrested for being homeless, but when you're homeless, it just brings on a lot of other problems
Sure.
that we're all aware of. And it's really unfortunate sometimes that those things get placed on the backs of law enforcement because we have to do something.
Especially when you have a community that has resources available to help with those types of things, which
Yeah.
we do. So,
Yeah. But with that, you got to keep in mind alcohol addiction and drug addiction and those things too. So this is something that we track. Probably every agency in the country should, if they don't, they should track this. So in 2017, our use of force we had 16 uses of force. And what that is if we have to manage somebody, it's simply more than just a verbal confrontation. I mean, if it comes to the point that we actually have to put our hands on you, and you're resistive to that, and we have to handcuff you, or if we have to use a form of force, whether that's hand-to-hand, OC, taser, ASP, whatever the case may be, that's documented on a subject management report, and we track those reports. And so, ideally, we would never use force, but it just doesn't work out that way. But if you look at 13 through 17, percentage-wise, we use less than half of 1%. And if you look at that 1.4%, that says police contacts. That doesn't say anything about being arrested. And our contacts are in the tens of thousands. If that starts to give you any relation about how good of a job these patrolmen are at verbally de-escalating these situations. I mean, you're talking about 2,392 physical arrests. And of those, 16 times we had to use force other than verbal de-escalation.
Pretty good.
So we've already kind of talked about this briefly, but this chart is a real good indicator that you can see that our carrying weapons charges are up and our shots fired calls are down. So again, that's headed in the right direction. There's been an extremely amount of hours and effort put towards this problem. I mean, any shot fire call is one too many, don't get me wrong. But we're well aware of the problem. It's a goal of ours, and we're working really hard at it.
so the pretty much a 100% increase in carrying weapons.
Yeah, charges, yeah.
Is that just because of the active measures taken as a result of more officers, or?
No doubt about it.
Okay.
Proactive patrols for sure, no question about it. Vehicle stops, in guns. I mean, it's unbelievable, and towards the end, on my very next slide, you'll see how many guns the department seized. And keep in mind, these are unlawful guns.
Do you have a number for the number of stops that we did this year versus last year?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that would have been back in, it might be an incidence here, let me go back. It's either an incidence or the calls for service chart. Let me run back to that calls for, I don't know if I'll be able to read it.
Yeah, it's under,
Do you see this
Weapon
under
law.
traffic stops?
yeah, weapon law violation 41.
Yeah, I'm looking for, I think he was asking
No,
about
I just
traffic
wanted to see the
stops.
correlation between traffic stops and
Oh, traffic. Yeah, that's what,
traffic, okay, so
Yeah,
traffic
from
stops.
last year was 5,226, and this year was 7,596.
Yeah, it's almost over 2,000 more
Yeah.
traffic stops.
Yep. And again, that's why calls for service, the minute you stop a car, that's a CFS. And then if anything happens during that stop, it becomes an incident.
Right.
And like I said, that's why you saw those charts just trending together. Yep.
Okay.
So that brings us to this slide, the POP unit and what they've accomplished this year. And you can kind of read down through there for yourselves the numbers, but I'm telling you, that's a lot of arrests. I mean, that's two people that are really dedicated to their job and working really hard. I mean, just that two-man unit alone seized 23 pistols, 4 shotguns, 3 rifles, 5 knives. I mean, they felony warrant arrests 37, misdemeanor arrests 106. I mean, it's unbelievable what they've done. And then the very last is department-wide gun seizures. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of guns that have come off the streets. And not all those are from traffic stops. Some of those are from search warrants as well. Whether it's a felon in possession of firearms, could be a search warrant where narcotics were involved, the combination of narcotics and firearms. So community involvement and community engagement, I mean, that's a real goal of the organization as well, too, and we spend a tremendous amount of time trying to engage the community and in keeping them informed of what we do and trying to build a rapport with them. And again, you can kind of see the pictures and read that for yourself. But as you're going through that, most generally, not all the time, but I'd say most generally, those activities, officers come in on their own time, on their day off, to participate in those activities. We just put it out there, we just ask them. They're not required to, they're not paid overtime to do it, and they come in and do it. So, I mean, there's a lot to be said for that. Not all of those activities, but a tremendous amount of them. So it brings us to our goals for 2017. Both of the majors put these goals together. I mean, they're obviously going to be extremely active in the police department. That should have been goals for 2018. There's a little bit of a typo there.
We'll forgive you that one.
Yeah, all right, thank you. They're all printed up anyway. But our number one goal, it goes without saying, I mean, reducing gun violence is the top priority. And we're utilizing every resource we can get our hands on. I mean, we use the ATF, the federal, the state, local. I mean, every avenue we have, it's our top priority in the organization. And you can read down through the rest of those. The only other one I'd point out that got approved in the budget that's extremely important is Lexipol and getting all of our policies updated. But just as importantly is the training that they provide with every one of those policies. With this program, we can actually train every day at our briefing sessions on one policy or another. It's a web-based program. They can look it up at home if they want. It'll be a major accomplishment for the organization. And I thank the council and Mr. Furneaux for approving the money to accomplish that task. Questions? I know that was quite a bit.
I don't have any questions. Just thank you for this and thank everyone else too that's been doing such a great job.
I will. Thank you.
We're gonna
for
miss
your
your
support.
leadership, chief.
Yeah.
Just, we keep saying it, but I mean it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a
Thank
lot
you
of
very
experience walking out the door, so it's gonna hurt, but, the only question I have, chief, is personnel-wise. Do you feel like an increase in personnel you'd see a sharp increase in these numbers, or do you feel like it'd start to level off? And basically, I mean, I'm assuming you'll answer that based off of the environment out there on the street, which I, nor anybody else up here has the ability to experience. So, what do you think on that?
You know, I think it would level off. I do. But you can clearly see what two people can do, just two people, with the ability that they're not running calls. I mean, you saw 33,000 calls, and think in terms of, for the most part, 30 people. 30 people run those 30,000 calls. That's the patrol division. Granted, they get a ton of help from all these other places, but those calls for service that go out, they come into that patrol division and they run those calls. So each of them are responsible for over 1,000 calls a year. That's a lot. That's a lot. It doesn't leave any time to do these other things. So with your help and the help of a federal grant, we had two people that don't have to answer those calls. But we ask them to do certain things every day. Here's where we want you. Here's who we want you working on. Here's what we want you doing. And I mean, they're doing it.
They produce.
And then, yeah, and the numbers speak for themselves. So to answer your question, yeah, I think at some point that no question is going to taper off. But what could two more do?
Okay, thanks.
Yep, thank you.
All right. Next, we have our stormwater utility fee feasibility study.
Good evening, I'm Leo Foley, Veenstra and Kim. Stormwater utility, as Jim pointed out, you're very well aware that you have a utility, a lot of people in the state do. Stormwater regulations are getting more complicated, the state and federal are putting more complications and more costs onto you all the time. Also, there's much higher, people are much more interested in water quality, and that, again, has an increasing cost. Typically, communities pay for that out of either a sanitary or streets budget. Even with, like you have a utility, but you mingle the monies together. So now a lot of cities are really looking at separating so that they have a stormwater utility separate, and it basically pays for itself. And the intent is to make it equitable, and that means that it's a fair way of doing it. Currently, a lot of communities do it. They assign a dollar value, and what happens is the residential ends up paying a higher proportion of the cost for what they're getting. So that's what we were tasked to do, is look into this. So there's your ordinance, chapter 100. The charges and fees are adopted every year through a resolution, or almost every year. And the next slide shows you, right now, you currently, for an unmetered residential, it's $2.50. And then you can see in red how much it has increased since 2014, generally a stepping thing. This is very, very common. This is how you metered residential. Unmetered multifamily, commercial, industrial is all based on square footage. And this is how you've been doing it. So this shows how many dollars that you actually have been collecting for stormwater. So last year, you collected a little over $565,000 for stormwater. Okay, so back to V&K was hired to investigate alternatives to implementation of a stormwater utility fee. Measure the impervious areas of all the metered properties. So not only, not the single family, but all of the metered properties to remeasure them with GIS. Review types of improvements that could be funded using the stormwater utility. How will the utility operate? And then present the results and help you with implementation. So the next one tells you the property information we got from the Des Moines County GIS site. It has parcel IDs, property classifications, and boundaries. And we use that, we brought it into our system. The quality of the aerial photography is very good. A lot of your properties were measured years ago when they first came in for permits, and the quality wasn't very good. So part of that was doing that. Obvious areas included roofs, driveways, sidewalks, that type of thing. Gravel surfaces were assumed to be impervious. Pretty much everybody handles it that way. This is just a map. I'm just going to buzz through this a little bit. This is showing all the areas that we ended up measuring in red, that all the areas that had different types of measurement. The next one is a little more clear, and it shows your commercial properties in blue. And then the yellow part is the impervious area of all your commercial properties. Next slide shows your industrial properties, the ones that are already regulated as industrial, and the same thing. We did an impervious thing. It tells you in the left-hand corner how many properties you had. Multifamily was the last slide in that area, and it shows you had 163 properties. Average impervious area is 12,230 feet squared. The next slide is the different types of methods that are commonly used. The per parcel fee, so you basically just have a fee per parcel. The next one's an impervious area. You kind of use a combination of those two, is your current utility. Uses a little bit of a combination of those two. Equivalent residential unit. What that one means is you basically look into it, you find out what an equivalent residence has for impervious, and you use that as a single unit. And that's one that's very common in the state of Iowa. Intensity of development means that you look at the areas, and certain areas that are very intensely developed get a higher number, areas that are more rural get a lower number, and you do it that way. And then a final way that people do is called the equivalent hydraulic area, and that's kind of a combination of not only the impervious area you have, but not only the impervious area, it adds the pervious area, so it kind of adds the two together. B&K looked at them all, and basically for the city of Burlington, we think the ERU method, the equivalent residential unit, is probably the smartest method to go through, and that's the one we did most of our homework on. Seemed to be common, it's very, very common in the state of Iowa. When we showed the different methods to the staff, they seemed to favor that one also. So we measured the impervious areas of a representative sample. So how do you figure out what one equivalent residential unit is equal to? Because that's really the biggest factor that you need to do. US EPA has a manual on how to do it, very high statistical analysis, and that's what we use. That means it's defendable. Somebody comes in and wants to challenge it, you have a very good defense of here's how it's done. And that's how we figured out that. All the non-single family units were measured. And the number of, so if you have a ERU that's equal to so much, let's just say it's an easy number, maybe it's 1 square foot. If you had a commercial house that had a commercial place that had 2 square feet, that's 2 ERUs. So it's an easy calculation. So using the EPA method, we had to measure 150 residential properties, and we selected them at a random generation, and we looked at what was that impervious area. It turns out to be 3,360 square feet. Therefore, 1 ERU is equal to 3,360 feet squared. ERUs in the state of Iowa range anywhere from 2,200 square feet to 4,000, just depending on what the community is made up of. Seemed to be, to me, More of the newer communities seem to have a higher one, and the communities that are older seem to push to the middle or lower. What we did just for calculation purposes, we said, now if we're going to do this new method, let's take a look at what the current rate is for residential. So the current rate is $2.50. So we said, let's just estimate $2.50 per equivalent residential unit. Fees in the state of Iowa range from $1 to about $6. So what we did here, this slide didn't quite show up as good as I wanted, but it shows that if you use that $2.50, and you can see down at the very bottom on residential, so there's approximately 9,831 residential properties. You're charging $2.50. You're getting $294,930 for that. And we did it for all the properties, all the different types of properties. Comes up to a sum somewhere about $700,000 if you did it that way. Currently, you're getting $565,000. So it's considered a more fair and a more equitable way of doing it, because that one ERU tells you that's how much impervious thing. Especially for small commercial, it's fair and more equitable, where typically small commercial and single family pay a higher proportion. So what it does is it makes it a better representation. All commercial, industrial, and multifamily properties have had impervious areas measured. So that means there's really not a lot of argument, because they can't, it's going to be on a measured thing where they can see it on a GIS. This is just showing what go ahead.
So if you were to use our existing rate structure, and you had put in just the better measurements that you did with GIS, what would the revenues be?
Yeah, it would have been much closer. I don't have that number right off the top of my head, but where we said it was 700 versus 565, I want to think maybe 100,000 of that, or 75 to 100,000, is just due to better measurements.
So, and primarily what we've found with the measurements with our, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but a lot of the commercial industrial were being billed based off of building permit data, which was more just the building facility itself and not the parking lots, even though our ordinance is structured that they should have been
Or
being
they
charged
added parking lots or something.
Yeah.
Somehow they added even gravel sometimes.
So our existing charge system should have been charging them for them.
Right.
It hadn't been caught. This is something where a big chunk of the change in the
Correct.
revenues that are being talked about has to do with just getting good measurements on the impervious surface and billing appropriately. And this presentation too, by the way, Nick has gotten to do with the chamber at one of their morning board meetings, so that they can be forewarned, the business community can have an idea of what's being talked about. Now, that doesn't hit everybody within the commercial and industrial sector, but it's at least part of that outreach that's been tried to get done to let folks know that there is a change that's coming up. I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's
in the
okay.
center, but-
No, that's fine. Then the next slide here shows a comparison, and what it's really showing is what is the current, if you had so much impervious area, under your current resolution, under the proposed ERU unit, how much would you be paying? So it's kind of interesting to look at. If you had a small area, 2,000 square feet, under your current resolution, you'd be paying $12.50. Under the proposed ERU, you'd be paying $2.50. But as you get to the bigger areas, go to the last one, if you had 400,000 feet squared, then you would have been paying $200. Now you'll be paying $365. So that's what we talk about, moving the money to make it fair and equitable. That's what I think Jim's getting at, is that we did need to make sure that everybody knows this kind of thing's coming.
Yeah, what percentage of the properties that you guys surveyed were under the 10,000 square foot? Any idea?
I do not know that right off my hand. I can get back to you on that. I think a lot, but I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, uses of increased fees. What can be done with the money that you get? And I think you're already doing this. Stormwater sewer improvements, elimination of cross connections, we understand that's big. Stormwater detention, green infrastructure, that can all be used for money. Also, managing a stormwater utility can be used with the monies. Stormwater utility fee reduction application. This is one that a lot of communities go into, not all, but a lot do. They offer opportunities for landowners to reduce but not eliminate. Nick, for instance, grabbed one that's a really good one in the state of Iowa. Marion has one that has this. Bettendorf, Iowa, where I live, has one where you can apply to get a reduction in your stormwater fee, basically by doing a number of things that we'll go over. Trouble with that one is it reduces revenues, of course, but it also it creates paperwork. Somebody has to manage that program and be able to make those decisions. These are the practices. These are the practices that people usually use for consideration in the residential area. For instance, a rain barrel. But it's not a simple rain barrel a lot of times. That barrel has to be certain size. It has to be hooked up so it doesn't just overflow. And there's a lot of things that go there. You can't reduce, for most cities, you can't reduce your fee any more than, say, 50%. And with one of these type of things. So that's things we're still working on. The next one shows practices that are available for commercial, industrial, and multifamily. The one, a detention pond, retention type pond. Those are very, very common. And a lot of the industrial and the larger commercial will do that type of thing. So that's something we have to consider. Okay. And this one just is showing some examples of the percent credit that could be given. And this is the area we've thrown this out. We haven't looked at it for you in a lot of, we haven't tried to tie it to revenue yet. But that's something we're working on right now. Again, this just shows quantification of how you would do certain things. Flood control, retention ponds, how you would have to do it. None of it's as simple as you would think. A lot of people think they can just dig a hole and call it good. And that's usually not going to work. So what are our next steps? Recommended by, the next step is to adopt the new stormwater utility based on the equivalent residential unit. And if that method's adopted, then we have other things to do. As I said, V&K's report recommends that, your staff recommends it, and truly the Iowa Association of Municipal Governments pretty much is, I don't want to say they're pushing people to it, but they're certainly making it very easy for everybody to go to this kind of thing. I know of very few communities not going this direction. Next step, existing ordinance, chapter 100. It needs to be repealed and replaced with the new ordinance. The new ordinance must fully describe the new utility purpose, objective, and the implementation clauses. The Iowa State has a nice model that's more or less fill in the blank, and then you tailor it to fit the city of Burlington. Nick and I have already taken a good look at that. I think it would fit very well for what you will want. So that's the next thing we need to start looking at. You could put the rate structure in that. Most people take the rate structure and do it as a resolution, kind of like what you've been doing in the past. It also covers very well dispute resolution, the rights of homeowners or any owners to appeal, how the adjustments and how the credits would be. So this is stuff that, along with all the definitions, because in this stormwater utility, what is a resident? What is impervious? These are all important subjects that the state's really already defined for us in this agreement. What's the schedule? Initiate the implementation of the revised stormwater utility by July 1st, 2018, assuming we can get into the meetings we need to so that we can work with the water board. The initial ERU will be equal to the 33,660 square feet, and that's the impervious area for an average single-family home in Burlington. The initial ERU charge would be $2.58, which you've gone through, I guess, the first reading tonight.
Resolution.
The resolution.
The resolution.
Okay. The current cost we talked about was $2.50. The initial estimate for fiscal year 18 revenue would be about $724,000 without adjustments. So if we decide to entertain ideas like rain barrels or detention ponds and you're going to give a reduction, then that number's going to go down. From what I've been hearing from other cities, it doesn't go down as much as anybody would think. So that's something I'd like to put a hard number of what I think in this town it would go down to. I think Bettendorf told me $5,000. So that's not a big dollar value compared to that. So again, and I've done a little bit of discussion with other cities. Cities that have implemented this relatively recently, that have very good programs in Marion, Coralville, Bettendorf. They're all worth probably talking to and trying to see exactly how many people utilize based on their populations, that type of thing, and how does it impact revenues. The next thing we wanted to say is the ordinance, maybe the credit system could have other benefits. Of course, reducing runoff, that's a big benefit. Now your storm systems don't get charged with all the water. You get the benefits of potential grant opportunities. A lot of the things that you guys are now being very successful getting, I think maybe having a credit system might help that. I'm not sure how much. It's never a one-to-one where you can do it, but I know that in grant applications, especially water quality benefits, are highly looked at for future monies. But of course, everything gets down to, it has to fit your city, and what are the impacts on the revenue? What are the costs that you coming up? I think Jim alluded to it. You have a lot of stormwater and sanitary and combination costs that are coming in the future. So I think this type of a utility will help you address some of that in the future, and it kind of sets you up. With that, are there any questions?
This isn't a new utility, it's just a restructuring.
This is not a new utility.
And it would involve us eliminating a previous resolution, right? And then reenacting this new one?
That go ahead.
It would take we have an existing ordinance that establishes our stormwater utility and gives out the definitions. This would replace it with a new one with different definitions. And it's primarily moving over to that ERU unit as a basis for what we're doing. Which is the model that, again, it's one that's used across the state, and it's not just Iowa. This is something that really has come down from a national level as what most places are doing.
No, it just makes sense.
It's not everyone.
A lot of the regulations that you have to, that cost you money, come from the US EPA. And this is sponsored a lot by the US EPA. A lot of the documentation comes from, like, how do you figure out what an ERU unit is for a community?
It's a standardization that's
it's
created by
driven.
the state. That makes perfect sense. I really like the idea of this. I would say one thing that I would prefer to see go along with this is, like you said, the mitigation that can be done on the property or in order to hold the water. I don't like the idea of creating new fee structures, or I would prefer to see us create the new fee structures with the idea that people can also reduce that fee by taking steps necessary in order to, it helps us in a lot of levels. It helps us on the sewer separation side of things.
One of the things that we've been working on with the long-term stormwater planning, the technical assistance we're getting from the EPA, and then a conversation that we will have later with the DNR to try and renegotiate consent order. some of these credit type activities, the retention, the rain gardens, that type of thing, will benefit us if we can show that the community is participating in that type of thing. It also will maybe have an impact on future regulations when it comes to. And it-
That chair's broken.
You don't want that one.
NP requirements. I also have a handout that the Iowa Municipal Utility Association put out on ERUs. It's from 2016. It's only 66, I shouldn't say it's only, 66 cities responded to this survey, and it kind of gives you a breakdown of what square footage has been, what they are charging for their ERU. Some of them cap certain categorizations and others don't. So I just wanted to hand this out to you just to kind of explain a little bit further what the ERU method is across the state of Iowa.
Do you guys agree that it's better to have a program where people can reduce that cost?
Yes, I would, but I suppose how difficult or time consuming would that be for us to get this going? Because I know you said that would be something later on, or that you're
That's something we
currently
were
looking-
hoping by July of this year to have the program basically in place, but probably by January have all of the details for what could be done. And that way, what I mean by details, how much time would it take to monitor what kind of things, like for instance, a rain barrel, you could say 10%, you could say 15, you could say 50%. How much percentage? So those are the type of things that we want to get worked out in the next couple of months.
And what I don't remember, just even looking at the Marion ordinance with theirs, it has the language in there for the credit to be done, but I can't remember if it details out the specifics of the different methods, or if it just gives the overall structure, and the methods are established or later, or separate.
It gives the category, but I don't think it tells you, for instance, how to do certain things. So it
So
doesn't give
it's-
that
it's-
detail.
It's kind of general, and I don't know if that's where you're looking with I know that you have been working on that base ordinance for us to do. Does it include that in that now, or is that something that you're looking to modify the ordinance after? Or-
I think that's something we'd have to work on. We'd have to modify the ordinance to get that in there.
Yeah, and I think that we'd like to get the base ordinance in, because the rate structure makes sense. I mean, July 1 is when we get it done. And it'd be nice to do it now rather than be in a spot to have to wait a year to modify that part. But as they work on what the different things that are workable, and I think part of the concern is which of those are too time intensive, just because they're
Right.
so little bang for the buck, and yet require a lot of work when we don't have any staff that, if whatever we do, we're gonna be pulling someone away from something else to do.
And that's to go out and verify that
Yep.
what they're saying they're doing.
Some of them
they're
are more time intensive than others to
Some of them
verify
are-
too.
Some of them are pretty obvious and aren't going to require a lot of time.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like,
Retention.
I know there's
a
will.
commercial entity wants to put in a retention pond, I mean, that's a pretty quick,
The commercial ones are
Or-
usually a little easier
Yeah.
because they already have to do a site plan,
Right.
Yep.
and that's included.
and as we go more toward metered residence, I mean, you've already got somebody going out there to get a reading, so, I mean,
It's not us, so.
It's not us, yeah.
oh, it's a walk, it's,
Yeah. I think, so what we're saying is you got to put the base ordinance in, but we will pledge to work
Yep.
on
Well,
a credit
This
system.
is to our benefit.
Yes.
I mean, we want to do that.
That's what we're hearing, so-
From a staff side, it makes sense, because we are also trying to use this, leverage this into other areas
Yeah,
as well.
okay.
All right. Thank you.
thanks, Leo.
All right, next we have the treasurer's report.
So in the packet was February's treasurer's report. I don't think there's anything unusual going on. We still have a few accounts that are in deficits. Most of those are just timing issues, waiting on grant funds, bond funds. So we have some projects that need to get closed out that are, we're waiting on the money right now. So our revenues seem to be trending a little bit less than like the ideal percentage, but that's, some of those are based on our seasonal revenues, so you're not going to see those revenues in at this time of the year, so those will start trending up as we start opening the Recplex and the golf course. Our expenses are pretty much right on target, so. Do you have anything to add, Jim?
Not really.
Does anybody have any questions?
Did we get a final number on the sewer thing over by Ivy?
I don't think that project's
Not
done,
yet.
Nick. And it's still, I don't think we have a final number.
With the quantity adjustments and the change order that we had talked about previous, about fixing the pipe in between the two known spots, and then after talking with Jesse about doing some hydro seeding because of the steepness, will be over $200,000 with that emergency repair, which is, we knew that change order was going to be $30,000 to $40,000 with the extra pipe, but the quantity adjustments really where we got affected trying to replace the fill dirt that was there with clay to be able to hold that slope. So it's not ideal, but it's hard to quantify that. So it's more of a quantity adjustment than a true change order with that dollar figure, but it's not ideal to see a project bid out the way it was to end up at that, that magnitude, but it had to be fixed.
Had to be fixed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have some appointments. Or one appointment, excuse me. Anybody have any issues?
Nope.
Okay,
Thank you for their service.
yes, absolutely. All right, anything, anything?
Actually, the only thing, and it's probably more of a, Linda's not here, she sent me a text and an email reminder. DPI is looking for artists for the bench painting application, so I'm sure we'll bring that up at the city council meeting as well.
Okay. Anything?
No, I think my wife and I are expecting a son this weekend, so I may or may not be here Monday. I'll
Good
let
luck.
you know.
Sounds good.
I like a fat cigar, Matt.
I had to give those up a long time ago.
Well, I'm not saying I did.
Yeah, anything?
No.
Okay. Anyone from the back? Nothing? Oh, okay. I hope it's good news.
It's better news than I gave you last week.
Okay.
After I sat down with Jesse, the Agency Street project, they finished up the Jimmy John's driveway, which should open tomorrow, at which point they will close down the frontage road. We talked with the contractor. We will not be shutting down West Burlington Avenue right away. They'll be able to work on the frontage road, outside, inside, and do that quick so they can try and work on Broadway, because we realized shutting down both Broadway and West Burlington Avenue would be not ideal. I mean, I don't know what else to say. So we're going to try and work that, so hopefully they'll get Broadway done, and then we can start up West Burlington Avenue. Get done with their section that they're
Good.
trying to do
Way
right
to
now.
be flexible, thank you.
So we're trying to work
That's
with that. So, and the other thing I heard is ITC, which is the power line that runs on the north side of Agency Street, will not be coming in until May to move their power lines on both sides of Roosevelt. So the intersection at the frontage road will be in red flash until that can be done. So the intersection will be probably complete at that point, but it'll still be in red flash because we can't get that other mast arm up until they move their power
Sure.
line. So
I had a question. Why is it Kirkwood?
red flash,
Kirkwood
short.
Roosevelt?
There's a short underneath there.
Okay.
They're gonna have to pull new wire.
All right.
Okay. All right. If that's it, then this meeting's adjourned.
Okay.